This is Icehouse. Today I'm bringing you an arc barrier guide. So the arc barrier is not a super technical weapon, so there probably won't be too much in the way of uh, tips and tricks in this case, but for too long didn't watch, the arc barrier triggers a perfect block if you were hit by something that could have killed you within the perfect block opportunity time. There are exceptions to this, which are uh, incinerators and its mods, corrosive cubes and its mods, self-destruct mods on any trap. Deadman switch is not an exception. You will trigger perfect block on a deadman switch. And the Iron Claw is capable of triggering perfect block even though it doesn't do damage. So that's a quick too long, didn't watch. Let's quickly go over the stats on the screen here. Okay, so overview. So Arc Barrier is the only defensive weapon in the game at the moment. It has an active time of 1.5 seconds, so when you activate it you are invulnerable to damage for 1.5 seconds. It recharges in 8.5 seconds by default. It has a perfect block opportunity of 0.5 seconds when fully upgraded. It leveled up as you as you leveled it up, it did get slightly higher. And a perfect block effect of increases shield duration by 0.5 seconds. So what this means is that if you are hit by something that can trigger a perfect block within 0.5 seconds, you will get an extra 0.5 seconds of active time. So instead of 1.5, it'll become 2. You'll also notice in the features that it says that you can use grappling hook while shielded and use hardware while shielded. Before you unlock those abilities, if you use your grappling hook or hardware, you will cancel the shield, which still happens when you fire the weapon. But let's jump into the basics of in the game so that I can show that off. Okay, we're going to quickly go over the basics of the arc barrier here. You'll notice that mine is recharging a little bit faster than 8.5 seconds. That's because I'm using the Nautilus perks, because I just want it to be a little bit more noticeable when I perfect block, make it a little bit easier for me to perfect block for demonstration purposes, and just so that we don't have to wait that extra 30 seconds in the actual video. So, if I right click at the moment, you'll notice that my screen went blue for a little bit. Now it's then once that was up, the arc barrier had like little red spaces instead of this blue, and the UI element at the bottom of the screen there slowly drains until it's completely empty, in which case the arc barrier comes back. If I was to right click and then shoot, it's still draining, but it doesn't actually show the red. That's weird. It's still draining, but the 1.5 seconds, I didn't get the full 1.5 seconds. Next up, let's quickly show a perfect block. When you perfect block, you'll notice the yellow around the edges of the screen, and in this case a much longer duration because I'm using the Nautilus suits. Obviously 0.5 seconds is nowhere near as much as 2 seconds, which the Nautilus suit perk for increasing perfect block effect is what it increases it to. So that's pretty much the basics of the arc barrier. It blocks attacks. If you happen to block within the perfect blocked opportunity, the edges of the screen turn yellow, and if you happen to do something that you're not allowed to do while shielded, it will cancel out the arc barrier active time, but won't refund any of the cooldown or anything, so you'll still have to wait out the full time. Now we're going to go on to some more advanced things. So we have here a couple of impalers and a death piston. We're going to start with the death piston. I'm just going to quickly show that you can get perfect block based off the side of the burning piston, but you'll notice it didn't destroy the piston. Something that's really important with the arc barrier is that with pistons and impalers, they blow up if they hit you normally, but with burning piston, if you hit the side and would have died to the burning piston. You can get the perfect block, but you will not get the destruction. Now I've got two impalers here. The reason for this is because I want to show the fact that the perfect block is always the same duration. So let's just quickly go in here. So I waited quite late there, and we got a full 3.5 duration. You can check that with the timestamps, or you can do some frame shenanigans with YouTube videos if you really like to confirm that. For the next one, I want it to be late, so trigger, activate immediately, and I still get 3.5 seconds duration. So depth pistons and impalers, both destructible with arc barrier, but also of note, your duration of your arc barrier uptime active effect is not affected by when in the perfect block opportunity that you actually get the block. It just adds in the extra time. Also of note, it doesn't matter how many times you get hit. It's basically a toggle. Once it's on, it's on. If you get hit again and it's still in the perfect block opportunity, that will just be a regular block. So if I had stepped in front of both of these impalers at the same time, triggered two perfect blocks at the same moment, I still would have had a 3.5 second duration. There's only really one more thing that we can cover, which would be lasers, because it's the only other trap that the arc barrier has a unique interaction with at this time. So let's quickly do that. Okay, so just around this corner I have two Sentry Beams. One just defaults and one with pinball, which is the one that widens the angle. So the reason I have both of these is I'm just going to show off the reflection. You've probably already seen this if you've been keeping up with community videos and whatnot. But as I come around, they trigger, they get activated, and then you'll notice that when I activated my arc barrier, it changed the trajectory of the laser beams. The regular laser beam, which is this one on the left, got immediately destroyed, whereas the one on the right did not. This is just because of pinball and the angle that it's on. When you use pinball, it changes the angle that reflections happen, and that stops it from going straight back at the laser. Other things that can stop it from going straight back, if you are not on flat ground, it often doesn't go straight back. That can vary. Sometimes geometry will end up getting it killed anyway, but most of the time, if you want to be reflecting lasers like this, you want to be standing on flat ground. But it's also, yeah, it's not going to work for pinball ones, because their trajectory is always going to be a little bit higher than themselves, and they'll bounce elsewhere. Occasionally, you'll get situations where it might bounce into them from a different block, but it's not super common. It can be much harder to actually get the reflect onto a pinball one. So if you're worried about people reflecting your lasers back at themselves, you just put pinball on it. Although you gotta then work out what angles you're going to be hitting, because that will mess up all those. Okay, so one last thing before we go into loadouts. You should be seeing on the screen a list of things that do not trigger perfect blocks. When it comes down to it, it's Incinerator, Napalm, and Eruption mods won't trigger it. None of those will trigger it. None of the Trap Destruct mods will trigger it, but the DMS ones will, which is why they're not listed on the screen. The Corrosion Cubes and Splatter won't trigger it, and Plasma Sentinels, the default shot triggers it, but the explosion from the self-destruct and the Plasma Novas from when they hit the ground, or hit something other than you, they won't trigger the perfect block either. it would have taken ages to show all these. I did quite a few tests, so I just decided to put up a table on the screen instead. And also, I mentioned this earlier unless you didn't watch, but the Iron Claws will trigger it. It doesn't matter if the perfect block happens as they're like attaching to you, or if they're already attached before you activate the shield. It'll still trigger the perfect block, and they are the only non-damage source that will trigger perfect block at the moment. Okay, for loadouts, there's quite a few good options for the arc barrier when it comes to weapons. The only thing I probably wouldn't recommend is the Falconic Plasma Bow. With this particular combination, you have no capacity to destroy most traps, which becomes especially important when you can't destroy incinerators, and plasma sentinels are the main ones that you can't destroy that are problematic. And incinerators in particular don't even trigger perfect block, so you can't always just use the perfect block to bypass them, which can be a little frustrating. As for the other ones, I think all of these are pretty good. The arc barrier really needs a weapon that can handle all situations if possible, which does make Fury's Edge a little dicey, but Fury's Edge and arc barrier makes a really good speed running loadout, because then you have all the defensive options in the game currently, and it allows you to bypass things a lot more often, and you can trigger Frenzy using the Fury's Edge itself. As for Demo Cannon, Volt Lancer, and Sledgeblade, all of these weapons are incredibly good at handling most things, and because they're able to handle most things, all three of these make good options for use with the arc barrier, I feel. Sledgeblade arc barrier is my personal favorite when I want to do like speedrunning outposts, particularly blind speedrunning outposts in the active queue. But Volt Lance arc barrier, I think, is possibly it is a contender for the best loadout in the game, and would actually be my personal pick for it. And Demo Cannon arc barrier is just very strong as well. Does mean that you have to learn a lot of weird shots because you don't have another weapon to help out with that. But once you get used to some of the stranger shots, you can generally get away with this quite well. The only one that I think is really difficult to do, even if you practice it, is the one with traps that are on the roof that are more than 2 spaces away. That is a pain of a shot, but if you want to see how to do that, just check out my Demo Cannon guide. As for perks, the Nautilus suit.
Sometimes I think I miss it out there.
The Nautilus suit is the only one that has perks that currently affect defensive weapons, and the also all three of these perks affect the arc barrier. So if you're trying to make your arc barrier stronger, these are the ones to go for. As for exactly which ones, these two actually have a pretty good effect on just the power of the arc barrier and make it pretty significantly stronger. This one here, Block Lock, which increases the perfect block duration, that's more of a quality of life thing. It makes it easier for you to use it. It doesn't necessarily make it stronger, and I don't think it's strictly necessary. You can learn to get to trigger the perfect block at the right time, whereas you can't learn to make your perfect blocks longer, or learn to recharge your weapons quicker. The So I would generally recommend these two over it. If you want to see more details on that, check out the Nautilus guide. Yeah, these are the perks that I would recommend when looking at perks for hardware.
Many tried to kill the Chimera. That is why
Any of
you
these
were
work.
made.
Just select them based off what you're planning on doing and what you need help with. realistically. That's pretty much the case always for hardware, but yeah, that's all I've got to say on that. That should be it for today for the Arc Barrier Guide. I'll be back next week with the Falconic Plasma Bow Guide, but until then there will be a couple videos, I believe, during the week. Still working out the exact details on that, but I shall see you then.